They say a king's love can move mountains, bend armies, reshape entire kingdoms. But what happens when that love lands on the wrong woman? When obsession devours duty, when lust strangles honor, when a crown becomes a curse? In the frozen halls of Valadorn, a child learns the answer before he can even speak his own name. They call him the Forgotten Prince, the bastard, the mistake. But history has a way of turning forgotten sons into legends. This is the story of a boy who had nothing, lost everything, and became the one thing his father could never be: a true king. Stay with me until the end. You'll see why they built statues of him across an empire. And if this story hits you where it hurts, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let me know where my tribe is watching from. The night Prince Lucian Rowan came into the world, his father was in another woman's bed. No trumpet sounded, no bells rang across the capital. The royal scribes did not record the hour of his birth in the golden chronicles of Valadorn. While Queen Marianne screamed through 14 hours of labor in the eastern wing of the palace, King Cedric Rowan lay tangled in silk sheets 3 floors below, his fingers tracing the bare spine of Celine Voss, whispering promises he would spend the next 2 decades keeping. The midwives knew. The guards knew. By dawn, the entire palace knew. And the queen, bleeding and exhausted, holding her newborn son against her chest, knew most of all. She named him Lucian, light, a cruel joke considering the darkness already gathering around his cradle. For 3 days, Cedric did not visit. When he finally entered the queen's chambers on the 4th morning, his eyes were hollow, his jaw tight. He stood at the foot of her bed and stared at the child as if looking at a debt he could not pay. "How is he?" Cedric asked, his voice flat. "He is your son," Marianne said. She did not lift her gaze from the baby's face. Cedric's throat worked. He took 1 step closer, then stopped. "I have matters to attend to." "Matters," the queen repeated softly. She looked up then, and her eyes were empty of tears. There were no tears left. "Of course. Your matters." He left without touching the child. That was the first abandonment. It would not be the last. Celine Voss was not beautiful in the way queens are beautiful. She did not have Marianne's grace, her dignity, her soft voice that could calm a room. Celine was sharp where Marianne was gentle. Her beauty was a blade, dark hair that fell like a river of ink, eyes the color of winter storms, a smile that promised secrets. She had arrived at court 2 years prior, a noblewoman from the southern provinces with impeccable bloodlines and a brother who commanded 3,000 soldiers. Within 6 months, she had the king's ear. Within a year, she had his heart. Within 2, she had his soul. The court whispered. Of course they whispered, but no one dared speak loud enough for the king to hear. Cedric Rowan had been a decent king once, competent, fair-minded. He had married Marianne for alliance, but he had treated her with respect, even warmth. The kingdom ran smoothly, taxes were reasonable, the borders were secure. Valadorn was not a great power, but it was stable, prosperous. A good place to raise children. Then Celine walked into a winter feast, and everything rotted from the inside out. They said she was a witch. They said she had fed him potions, cast spells, bound his will with dark arts. The truth was simpler and far more pathetic. Cedric Rowan was a man who had spent his whole life doing what was expected, and Celine made him feel like he was choosing something for himself. She laughed at his jokes. She asked his opinions. She looked at him like he was more than a crown, and he fell so hard and so fast that by the time he realized he was drowning, he had already forgotten how to swim. 3 months after Lucian's birth, Cedric moved Celine into the palace, not as a mistress tucked away in some hidden chamber. No. He gave her rooms in the western wing, across from his own. He dined with her publicly. He walked with her in the gardens while Marianne watched from a window above, holding their son, her face a mask of stone. The nobles began taking sides. Some stayed loyal to the queen out of tradition. Others courted Celine's favor, sensing the shift in power. The court split like a cracked mirror. And at the center of it all, a baby who could not yet walk, whose father would not acknowledge his existence beyond the barest legal requirement. Of course, when Lucian was 6 months old, Cedric made his decision. It was not a public decree. There was no formal announcement. He simply stopped pretending. The queen and the child were moved, not exiled, not officially, just relocated. to a fortress in the northern countryside, 3 days' ride from the capital, a cold gray place called Grimstone Keep. It had been a military outpost once, before the wars ended. Now it was a storage house for unwanted things. Marianne did not protest. She had no power left to protest with. Her family had already distanced themselves, unwilling to risk the king's wrath. Her allies at court had evaporated. She packed her belongings in silence, dressed her son in wool, and climbed into the carriage without looking back at the palace. Cedric did not come to see them off. The journey north took 5 days because of the snow. Lucian cried most of the way, a thin wailing sound that cut through the wind. Marianne held him against her chest and sang lullabies in a voice that cracked on every third word. When they arrived at Grimstone Keep, the place was half ruined. Cold stone walls, narrow windows, a great hall that echoed with emptiness, a skeleton staff of 12, 6 guards, 3 servants, 2 cooks, 1 aging scholar named Matthias, who had been exiled from court for speaking too honestly about the king's choices. "This is your home now," the captain of the guard said. His name was Tormund, a grizzled man with a scar across his jaw and eyes that had seen too many battles. He looked at the baby in the queen's arms and his face softened. "We will keep you safe, my lady." "Safe," Marianne whispered. She looked around at the cold walls, the empty hall. "Yes, safe." She walked inside and the door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. Lucian's first memories were of cold stone floors, cold wind howling through cracks in the walls, cold mornings waking up alone because his mother was standing at the window again, staring south toward a palace she would never see again. He learned to walk in that hall, learned to talk in the courtyard where snow piled higher than his head. His first words were Mama and Tor, because Tormund spent more time with him than anyone else. The old soldier would carry him on his shoulders, tell him stories about battles that were probably half lies, teach him how to hold a wooden sword before he was tall enough to lift it properly. The queen tried. For the first few years she tried. She read to him from old books, taught him letters, sang to him when the nightmares came. But something inside her had broken on the journey north, and every year it broke a little more. She smiled less, spoke less. Some days she did not leave her room at all. Lucian learned not to ask why. By the time he was 5, he understood. The other children in the nearby village whispered when he walked past. Bastard. Rejected. Forgotten. Their parents did not stop them. Even the servants at Grimstone Keep spoke carefully around him, as if he were made of glass. One winter morning he asked Tormund why his father never visited. The old soldier was sharpening a blade. He did not look up. "Your father is a complicated man, boy. That is not an answer." Tormund's hand stilled. He looked at Lucian for a long moment. "You are right. It is not. The truth is, your father made a choice. He chose someone else." "Why?" "Because men are weak, lad. Even kings. Especially kings." Lucian stared at the floor. "Will he ever choose me?" Tormund set down the blade and knelt so they were eye to eye. "Listen to me, Lucian. You cannot wait for another man to choose you, not even your father. You understand? You make yourself into something they cannot ignore." "How?" "You survive. You learn. You become stronger than the ones who cast you out. And when the time comes, you do not ask for their approval. You take what is yours." Those words planted themselves in Lucian's chest like seeds in frozen ground. The years crawled past like wounded animals. At 7, Lucian began training with Tormund and the other guards. Real training, not child's play. They worked him until his hands bled, until his legs buckled, until he vomited in the snow and got back up because Tormund was screaming at him to move. "Boy, move, the world does not wait for you to catch your breath." At 9, Matthias took over his education. History, languages, philosophy. The old scholar was ruthless in his own way, rapping Lucian's knuckles with a wooden rod whenever his attention drifted. "A king must know more than how to swing a sword," Matthias would say. "He must know why men follow, why kingdoms fall, why power is never given, only taken." At 11, Lucian began sneaking out of Grimstone Keep at night. He would walk to the nearby village, listen to the farmers talk about troubles in the kingdom, taxes rising, soldiers taking food without paying, roads falling apart, bandits growing bolder. The king, they said, did not care anymore. He was too busy with his mistress. Lucian never told them who he was. He just listened. At 13, his mother died. It was not dramatic. No assassins, no poison. She simply faded. One morning, she did not wake up. The servants found her in bed, eyes closed, hands folded across her chest as if she had finally decided to stop pretending. They buried her in the courtyard of Grimstone Keep. Tormund said a few words. Matthias read from an old text. Lucian stood in the snow and felt nothing. Not grief, not rage, just a cold, hollow space where something human used to be. That night he wrote his first letter to the king. It was short. Father, your wife is dead. I thought you should know. Your son, Lucian. He sent it with a rider. No reply ever came. Hints. Meanwhile, in the capital, the kingdom was rotting. Selene had not been idle. Over the years, she had woven herself into every corner of court. She whispered in Cedric's ear at night, shaped his decisions during the day. She convinced him to appoint her allies to key positions. Tax collectors who skimmed from the top. Generals who cared more about their estates than their soldiers. Judges who sold verdicts to the highest bidder. And at the center of her web was her nephew, a boy named Dorian Voss. Dorian was everything Lucian was not. Pampered, arrogant, weak-chinned and cruel-eyed. He had never held a sword except for ceremony, never missed a meal, never questioned whether he deserved the privileges heaped on him since birth. He was 16 years old, and Selene had been grooming him for the throne since he was 10. She did it carefully. A word here, a suggestion there. She planted the idea in Cedric's mind slowly, like a gardener cultivating poison ivy. The kingdom needs stability. Lucian is untested, unknown, raised in exile. Dorian is here, trained, ready. He has been by your side. He understands the court. At first, Cedric resisted. Lucian is my blood. Blood is not enough, Selene would whisper. You need someone you can trust, someone who will protect your legacy. Dorian worships you. Lucian does not even know you. It took 3 years, but she broke him. On Dorian's 18th birthday, Cedric made the announcement. In front of the full court, he named Dorian Voss as his heir apparent. Not officially legitimized as a Rowan, but close enough. The crown would pass to him when Cedric died. The nobles erupted. Half supported it because they feared Selene. The other half opposed it because it shattered every tradition Valadorn had ever held. A nephew over a son, a Voss over a Rowan? It was madness, but Cedric would not be moved. The decision is made. Word reached Grimstone Keep 2 weeks later. Lucian was 16 years old. He read the letter in the Great Hall, Tormund and Matthias standing on either side of him. He read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, set it on the table, and walked outside into the snow. He stood in the courtyard for an hour, did not move, did not speak. Tormund finally came out. Lad, I am not his son, Lucian said quietly. I never was. You are. No, I am a mistake he is trying to erase, then prove him wrong. Lucian turned. His eyes were cold, empty. How? By becoming what he is not. A man who keeps his word. A man who does not abandon his people. A man who does not let a woman destroy his kingdom because he is too weak to tell her no. The words hung in the frozen air. Lucian nodded slowly. Then I will need to see the kingdom. Over the next 2 years, Lucian traveled. Not as a prince. He told no one his name. He wore plain clothes, carried his own pack, worked for his meals. He walked through villages where children starved, saw farmers beaten by tax collectors, watched soldiers extort merchants on the roads. Everywhere he went, he heard the same thing. The king does not care anymore. The king has forgotten us. He also trained. Every town had a garrison. Every garrison had soldiers willing to spar for coin. Lucian fought them all. Lost more than he won at first. But he learned. He learned how to read an opponent's weight, how to turn a blade at the last second, how to take a hit and keep moving. He learned to fight dirty, because honor meant nothing when your opponent was trying to kill you. He learned to lead too. Not from books, but from watching. He saw which captains their men respected and which ones they mocked behind their backs. He saw how a single word could rally tired soldiers or break their morale. He saw that loyalty was not about fear or gold. It was about standing next to your men when the world went to hell. By the time he was 18, Lucian Rowan was no longer the forgotten child crying in a carriage. He was 6 feet tall, lean and scarred, with his father's jaw and his mother's sad eyes. He moved like a soldier, spoke like a nobleman, fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. And then the Northern Empire invaded. Mac. The Kingdom of Kael had been watching Valadorn for years, waiting for the right moment. When reports came back that the Valadorn army was falling apart, led by incompetent nobles who bought their commissions, they struck. 5,000 soldiers crossed the northern border in the dead of winter. They burned 3 villages before anyone in the capital even knew they were there. Cedric called his generals. Dorian stood at his side, nervous and sweating despite the cold. "What do we do?" "We send the army," one general said. "Which regiments?" another asked. They argued for 2 hours while the enemy marched closer. Finally, they sent 4,000 men north under the command of Lord Varric, a fat nobleman who had never seen combat but had paid a fortune for his title. The army marched out with banners flying, confident and loud. They were slaughtered in 3 days. Varric tried to meet the Kael forces in open battle, arranging his men in pretty lines like he had read in books. The Kael commander feigned a retreat, drew the Valadorn army into a narrow valley, and collapsed on them from both sides. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. Varric died with an arrow through his throat. 2,000 Valadorn soldiers died with him. The rest scattered into the hills, leaderless and terrified. The Kael army kept marching south. Now there was nothing between them and the capital but snow and panicking villagers. The court descended into chaos. Nobles began fleeing the city. Merchants packed their goods. The common people looked to the palace and saw only silence. Cedric stood in the throne room, staring at maps, his face gray. Selene stood beside him, her hand on his arm. "We need to negotiate," she said softly. "Offer them gold, land, anything." "We cannot afford to look weak," Dorian stammered. He was terrified. Everyone could see it. "We are weak," Cedric whispered. His voice was hollow. "We are broken." And then the door opened. Lucian Rowan walked into the throne room. He was covered in road dust. His cloak was torn. His boots were caked with mud. He had ridden for 3 days straight when he heard about the invasion. Behind him stood Tormund and 20 soldiers from Grimstone Keep. Not many, but enough. Every head turned. Cedric stared at his son as if seeing a ghost. Lucien stopped 10 feet from the throne. He did not kneel. He looked his father in the eye and said, "I can stop them." The room went silent. Cedric's mouth opened, closed. I know the northern terrain. I have fought their scouts before. I know how they move. Give me command of what is left of the army, and I will hold the line." "You have no authority," Selene said sharply. "You are not—" "I am his son," Lucian said, his voice cold and clear. "Whether he claims me or not, I am his blood. And I am the only one in this room who has any idea how to fight a war." Dorian stepped forward, his face red. "You cannot just walk in here and—" "Shut up," Lucian said without looking at him. Dorian froze. Cedric stood. His hands were shaking. "Why would you help us?" "After everything—" "Because they are my people too," Lucian said quietly. "Even if you are not my father, they are still mine." The words hit like a hammer. Cedric looked at his son, at the scars on his hands, the hard line of his jaw, the eyes that held no hope, no love, only cold purpose. And for the first time in 18 years, Cedric Rowan felt shame. "Take whoever will follow you," Cedric said hoarsely. "Do what you can." Lucian nodded once. Then he turned and walked out. Tormund followed. So did the 20 soldiers. And in the shadows of the court, other men began to move. Soldiers who remembered honor. Captains who were tired of serving cowards. One by one, they slipped out of the palace and followed the forgotten prince north into the snow. By the time Lucian reached the border, he had 300 men. It was not enough, but it would have to be. The Kael army was 5,000 strong when they crossed the border. Lucian had 300 men, half of them barely trained, most of them exhausted from the forced march north. The math was simple. They were going to die. Tormund knew it. Every soldier knew it. but none of them said it out loud. They reached the village of Graycrest 2 days before the enemy. It sat in a valley between two ridges, the only passable route south for an army that size. If the Kael forces wanted to reach the capital without losing weeks to mountain passes, they had to come through here. Lucian stood on the ridge and looked down at the village. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children played in the snow. These people had no idea what was coming. "We cannot hold this," Tormund said beside him. "Not in open ground." "I know." "So what are we doing here?" Lucian pointed to the ridges on either side. "We are not holding ground. We are making them bleed for every step." Tormund looked at the terrain, then at Lucian. "You want to turn this valley into a kill box?" "Yes." The old soldier grinned, cold and vicious. "Now you are thinking like your mother's son." They spent 2 days preparing. Lucian sent half his men to the eastern ridge, half to the western. They dug shallow trenches in the snow, piled rocks for cover, cut down trees to block the narrow passes at the valley's southern exit. It was not fortification, it was desperation dressed up as strategy. Lucian walked among the men as they worked. He did not give speeches, did not promise victory. He just worked beside them, hauling stones, digging frozen earth until his hands bled. The soldiers watched him. This prince who was not a prince, this boy their king had thrown away. And something shifted in their eyes. One soldier, a grizzled sergeant named Cade, asked him, "Why are you here, my lord? You do not owe this kingdom anything." Lucian did not stop digging. "Maybe not. But I owe you. You followed me north. That means something." Cade stared at him. Then he nodded and went back to work. That night, Lucian stood alone on the ridge. The wind cut through his cloak like knives. He thought about his mother, cold in the ground, his father, warm in his palace, Selene, whispering poison into a weak man's ear, and Dorian, that smug little coward who would inherit a kingdom he did nothing to earn. Something hard and bitter coiled in Lucian's chest. Not rage. Rage was hot, loud, uncontrolled. This was colder. This was the feeling of a man who had been stepped on his entire life finally realizing he could step back. You cannot wait for another man to choose you. Tormund's words from years ago. You make yourself into something they cannot ignore. Lucian looked south toward the capital, toward his father. "Watch," he whispered to the wind. "Watch what the son you abandoned can do." The Kael army arrived at dawn. They came down the northern road in columns, disciplined and confident. Banners snapping in the wind, armor gleaming dull in the gray light. At their head rode General Castor, a man with a face like a cliff and eyes that had seen 1,000 men die. He had fought in 12 campaigns, won 11 of them. He did not expect trouble from a broken kingdom's scattered remnants. He should have. The first volley of arrows came from the eastern ridge. 50 shafts, loosed in near unison. They slammed into the front ranks of the Kael column. Men screamed, horses reared, the column collapsed into chaos. Castor shouted orders, "Shields up, reform!" The second volley came from the western ridge, then a third. The Kael soldiers raised shields, formed a testudo, but the arrows kept coming. Not enough to break them, but enough to make them bleed, enough to make them angry. Castor made his decision. Archers suppressing fire on those ridges. Infantry, advance and clear them out. 2,000 soldiers surged forward, splitting into two groups, charging up the slopes toward Lucian's positions. That was when Lucian gave the signal. The trees they had cut fell across the narrow paths, blocking the advance. The Kael soldiers had to slow down, climb over obstacles, expose themselves. Lucian's archers picked them off one by one. Men fell screaming, blood stained the snow, but there were too many. The Kael forces kept coming, overwhelming through sheer numbers. They reached the first trenches. Close combat erupted, steel on steel, screams, the wet sound of blades cutting flesh. Lucian was in the middle of it. He fought with a longsword, no shield, every movement brutal and efficient. A Kael soldier lunged at him. Lucian sidestepped, brought his blade down on the man's neck, kept moving. Another came from the left. Lucian ducked under the swing, drove his sword through the man's ribs, ripped it free. Around him, his soldiers fought like cornered animals. They knew they were outnumbered, knew they were going to lose. But they did not run. Tormund fought beside him, roaring like a demon, his axe splitting skulls. Fall back, he shouted. Staged retreat! Lucian's men began pulling back, section by section, covering each other, making the Kael forces fight for every yard. They abandoned the first trench, then the second. The enemy surged forward, thinking they were winning. They were wrong. Lucian had placed his best men at the valley's southern exit, hidden behind the fallen trees and rocks. As the Kael soldiers poured into the narrow choke point, those men attacked from both sides, a hammer, an anvil. The Kael forces were crushed between two walls of steel. The killing was efficient and horrifying. Men packed so tightly they could not swing their weapons, blades stabbing through gaps, blood pooling in the snow. The screaming went on for 10 minutes that felt like hours. When it ended, 400 Kael soldiers were dead or dying. The rest pulled back, shaken and furious. Lucian stood on the southern ridge, breathing hard, covered in blood that was not all his own. He looked down at the carnage and felt nothing. No triumph, no guilt, just cold calculation. "This will not stop them," Tormund said, breathing hard beside him. "We hurt them, but they will come back." "I know. But now they are angry. Angry men make mistakes." Lucian turned to his soldiers. "We pulled back to the village. Rest while we can." They retreated into Graycrest as the sun climbed higher. The villagers stared at them, terrified. Lucian walked through the square, saw mothers clutching children, old men gripping farming tools like weapons. An old woman approached him. "Are we going to die?" Lucian looked at her. Her face was lined with 60 years of hard winters. Her hands were shaking. He could lie. Tell her they would be fine, that help was coming. But lies were for weak men and kings who hid in palaces. "I do not know," he said quietly, "but if we do, we will make them remember us." The old woman stared at him, then she nodded and walked away. Yeshvatz. That night Castor made his move. He sent scouts around the ridges, avoiding the valley entirely. They moved through the forest, slow and careful, circling to hit Graycrest from the east. It was smart. It was what Lucian would have done. But Lucian had scouts too. They reported back 2 hours before midnight. Enemy moving through the eastern woods. At least 1,000. Tormund cursed. "We cannot fight on two fronts." "We are not going to," Lucian said. He pointed to the map spread on the table. "We let them into the village, then we burn it." Everyone in the room went silent. Cade spoke first. "My lord, the villagers are already evacuating. I sent them south this afternoon. By now they are 10 miles away. And our supplies? Gone with them." "You want to turn this place into a trap?" Tormund said slowly. "Yes. We make them think they have won, let them occupy the village, then we torch it with them inside." "That is murder," one of the younger soldiers said, his voice shaking. Lucian looked at him. His eyes were empty. "No. Murder is what they did to our people when they crossed the border. This is war. And in war, the only sin is losing." The young soldier looked away. They spent the next hour preparing, barrels of oil placed in key buildings, straw piled in corners, torches hidden on the rooftops. Lucian's men pulled back to the western edge of the village, out of sight, waiting. The Kael forces entered Graycrest an hour before dawn. They moved cautiously at first, expecting ambush, but the village was empty, silent. They spread out, occupying buildings, setting up positions. Castor himself rode into the square. He looked around, frowning. Something was wrong. He could feel it. "General," one of his captains called, "no bodies, no supplies. They abandoned this place." Castor's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to give the order to pull back. Lucian lit the first torch. Flames erupted across the village. The oil-soaked buildings went up like kindling. Fire roared through streets, leapt from roof to roof. The Kael soldiers panicked, tried to retreat, but the flames boxed them in. Men burned, screaming, thrashing, human torches running through the snow. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, thick and choking. Some soldiers made it out, most did not. Lucian watched from the ridge. His face was stone. Beside him, Tormund said nothing. There was nothing to say. By the time the sun rose, Graycrest was ash, and the Kael army had lost another 600 men. News of the battle reached the capital 3 days later. Cedric sat in the throne room when the messenger arrived, covered in road dust and exhausted. He knelt and delivered his report. The Northern Army has been halted, Your Majesty. Prince Lucian Rowan holds the line. The room erupted. Nobles shouting, some in disbelief, some in anger, some in something close to hope. Celine stood beside the throne, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes were sharp. This changes nothing. He delayed them. He did not defeat them. He did more than anyone else managed, one of the generals muttered. Dorian stepped forward, his face red. He has no authority to command royal forces. He should be arrested for... He saved the capital, the general snapped. While you stood here doing nothing. How dare you? Enough, Cedric said quietly. Everyone fell silent. The king looked old, the weight of his mistakes carved into every line of his face. He stared at the messenger. How many men does my son have? Less than 200 now, Your Majesty. They took heavy losses. And the enemy? 3,500, maybe less. They are regrouping. Cedric closed his eyes. Send reinforcements. Your Majesty, Celine said softly, placing a hand on his arm. We cannot afford to... I said send reinforcements, Cedric repeated louder. His voice cracked. 2,000 men, whatever he needs. Celine's jaw tightened. She said nothing more, but in the shadows of the court, her mind was already turning. The reinforcements arrived a week later. 2,000 soldiers, fresh and well-equipped, led by a nobleman named Lord Grigor. He was one of Celine's creatures, loyal to her before the crown. Everyone knew it. He rode into what was left of Lucian's camp with banners flying and an expression of smug superiority. He dismounted, ignored the exhausted soldiers, and walked straight to Lucian. Prince Lucian, he said, his tone dripping with false respect. I bring men and supplies by order of the king. I am to assume joint command. Lucian looked at him. He was covered in soot and blood, had not slept in 2 days, and his patience was a thread stretched to breaking. Joint command. Yes. His Majesty felt it wise to... No. Gregor blinked. Excuse me? You are not assuming anything. Your men will follow my orders or they can march back to the capital and die when the enemy reaches the walls. I am a lord of the realm. You are... His son, Tormund said, stepping forward. His hand rested on his axe. And the only reason you are not pissing yourself in the throne room right now is because he bled for you. Gregor's face went purple. I will report this insubordination. Do it, Lucian said coldly. Write your letter, send it south, and while you are waiting for a reply, the enemy will kill us all, so either fall in line or get out of my camp. The two men stared at each other. Around them, soldiers watched. Gregor's men, Lucian's men, waiting to see who blinked first. Gregor blinked. He forced a smile. Of course, my lord. Your command. He turned and walked away, his back rigid with barely contained rage. Tormund watched him go. That man will stab you the first chance he gets. I know, Lucian said. That is why we are not giving him the chance. Over the next 2 weeks, Lucian trained the reinforcements, integrated them with his veterans, and prepared for the next engagement. The Kyle army was regrouping 20 miles north, waiting for reinforcements of their own. It was a race. Whoever struck first would win. Lucian chose to strike. He led a night raid on the Kyle's supply lines, burning their food stores, killing their sentries, disappearing into the forest before they could respond. 3 nights later, he did it again. And again. The enemy could not sleep, could not eat without fear. Morale crumbled. General Castor was not a fool. He knew what was happening. This prince, this boy everyone said was nothing, was bleeding him to death one cut at a time. He has to be stopped, Castor told his captains. We march on his position tomorrow. Full assault. No more games. The next morning, the Kyle army moved south in force. Lucian was waiting. He had chosen his ground carefully. A frozen river, the ice thick enough to hold men, but not horses. The Kyle forces would have to cross on foot, exposed, while Lucian's archers rained death from the far bank. The battle began at noon. The Kyle soldiers advanced across the ice, shields raised. Arrows fell like hail. Men slipped, fell, were trampled by those behind them. Blood spread across the white ice in red rivers. But they kept coming. 3,500 men. They reached the far bank and slammed into Lucian's lines. The fighting was vicious. No strategy now, no tactics. Just men killing men. Lucian fought in the center, his sword arm numb, his breath coming in ragged gasps. A Kael soldier lunged. Lucian blocked, countered, drove his blade through the man's chest. Another came, and another. Beside him, Tormund fell, an axe to the shoulder. The old man went down hard. Tor! Lucian dropped to his knees, dragged him back. The old soldier was bleeding badly. His face was gray. Go, Tormund rasped. Keep fighting. Shut up. Lucian ripped a strip from his cloak, pressed it to the wound. You are not dying today. Tormund grinned, blood on his teeth. Stubborn little bastard. Learned from you. Kate appeared, grabbed Tormund's other arm. We have got him. Go! Lucian stood, turned back to the fight. His soldiers were holding, barely. Gregor's men were faltering, pulling back. Cowards. Lucian roared at them. Hold the line! Some stopped, some kept running. The Kael forces pressed harder, sensing weakness. They were going to break through. And then the horn sounded. From the south. A single, clear note. Lucian turned. A new force was coming. 500 soldiers running full speed, banners flying. At their head was a woman in armor, her hair braided for war, her face hard as stone. It was Lady Myra Ashford, a minor noble whose lands bordered the northern frontier. Lucian had met her once, years ago, when he was traveling. She had fed him, asked no questions, sent him on his way. He had not expected to see her again. She slammed into the Kael flank like a hammer. Her soldiers were fresh, fierce, and they tore through the enemy ranks. The Kael forces buckled. Castor saw his advantage slipping and made the hard call. Retreat. Retreat! The Kael army pulled back, leaving their dead on the ice. Lucian stood there, gasping, covered in blood. His legs shook. Around him, his soldiers were collapsing, exhausted. But they were alive. Mira rode up to him. She looked down from her horse, her expression unreadable. You look like hell, Prince. Lucian laughed. It was a broken, half-mad sound. You are late. Better late than dead. She dismounted. I heard what you did at Graycrest, what you have been doing, and I decided it was time someone reminded this kingdom what honor looks like. She held out her hand. Lucian stared at it. Then he took it. For the first time in his life, he was not alone. The victory at the frozen river changed everything. Word spread across the kingdom. The forgotten prince, the bastard son, the boy thrown away like trash. He had defeated an empire's army, twice. People began calling him the true king. Cedric heard the reports in the throne room. His hands shook. His face was pale. Around him the court whispered. Some smiled. Some frowned. Selene stood silent, her face a mask. That night she went to Dorian's chambers. He was pacing, sweating, panicking. He's going to take everything. The throne, my future, everything. Calm yourself, Selene said coldly. How can I be calm? The people love him. The soldiers follow him. Even father... Your uncle is weak. He always has been. But weakness can be useful. She moved to the window, looked out at the city. Lucian is a threat, but threats can be dealt with. How? She turned to him. Her eyes were cold, calculating. We accuse him of treason. We claim he is building an army to overthrow the king. We force Cedric to choose between his guilt and his crown. But he saved the kingdom. No one will care if we control the story. We have the court. We have the gold. We plant the right letters, bribe the right witnesses, and by the time Lucian returns, he will be a traitor instead of a hero. Dorian stared at her. You're going to destroy him. Selene smiled. I am going to erase him, just like we erased his mother. 3 weeks later, Lucian received the summons. It was delivered by a royal courier, sealed with the king's mark. He read it twice. Prince Lucian Rowan, you are hereby summoned to the capital to answer charges of treason, unlawful command of royal forces, and conspiracy against the crown. You will surrender yourself within 10 days or be declared an enemy of the realm. Tormund, still recovering from his wound, read it over Lucian's shoulder. It is a trap. I know. Then do not go. Lucian folded the letter. If I do not, they will brand me a traitor. My men will be hunted. Everyone who followed me will die. So we fight. Against the entire kingdom? We just spent a month bleeding to save it. I will not start a civil war. Cade stepped forward. My lord, if you walk into that throne room, they will kill you. Maybe. Lucian's voice was calm. Or maybe it is time my father looked me in the eye and admitted what he has done. This is suicide. No, Lucian said quietly. This is the only move I have left. He looked at Tormund. If I do not come back, take the men south. Disappear. Live. Lad, that is an order. Tormund's jaw clenched. Then he nodded. 2 days later, Lucian rode south toward the capital. He took 10 men with him. Not an army, not a threat, just a prince going to face his father. Lady Mira rode beside him. I could bring my soldiers, storm the palace. Lucian shook his head. This is not a war they can fight. This is something I have to finish, even if it kills you? He looked at her. His eyes were tired. I have been dead since the day I was born. At least this way, I die on my feet. They rode in silence after that. And ahead, in the capital, Selene prepared her final trap. The capital gates opened for Lucian like the jaws of a beast. He rode through at midday with his 10 soldiers, their horses' hooves echoing on cobblestones that had not seen him since he was an infant. The streets were packed. Word had spread that the forgotten prince was returning. People lined the roads, silent and staring. Some faces held hope. Others held fear. Most held nothing but curiosity, the way crowds gather to watch an execution. Lucian kept his eyes forward. He wore no armor, carried no banner, just a sword at his hip and the kind of exhaustion that sits in your bones after too many nights wondering if you will see morning. Lady Mira rode beside him, her jaw set, her hand never far from her blade. They are watching you like a ghost, she said quietly. Maybe that is what I am. They passed through the lower districts where the poor lived in houses that leaned against each other like drunks. Children with hollow cheeks watched from doorways. Old women whispered behind their hands. A young man shouted from a window. Long live Prince Lucian! A few others took up the cry. Not many. Enough. The royal guard met them at the palace gates. 50 soldiers in polished armor, their faces blank. Their captain stepped forward, a man Lucian did not recognize. Prince Lucian Rowan, you will surrender your weapons and come with us. Lucian dismounted. He unbuckled his sword, handed it over. His men did the same. Mira hesitated. Do it, Lucian said softly. We are not here to fight. She handed over her blade, her eyes burning. The guards surrounded them, not quite an arrest, but close enough. They were marched through the palace courtyard, past fountains Lucian barely remembered, up marble steps his mother had walked down for the last time 18 years ago. The place smelled like wealth and rot, perfume trying to cover something dead underneath. They were brought to a waiting chamber outside the throne room, a cold place with stone walls and narrow windows. The door closed behind them, locked. Mira paced like a caged animal. This is insane. They are going to kill you in there. Probably. Then why? Because if I run, I prove them right. Lucian sat on the bench, leaned his head back against the wall. His whole life, people had called him a coward son, a rejected mistake, something shameful. If I die today, at least I die making them say my name. Mira stopped pacing. She looked at him for a long moment. You are either the bravest man I have ever met, or the most broken. Maybe both. The door opened. A royal attendant, thin and nervous, gestured. The king will see you now. Lucian stood. He straightened his cloak, ran a hand through his hair. It did not help. He looked like what he was. A soldier. A man who had spent a month bleeding in the snow, not the polished princes who paraded through these halls. He walked into the throne room. It was exactly as he remembered, and nothing like it at all. The high ceilings, the columns carved with the history of the kingdom. The throne itself, massive and cold, sitting at the far end like a judge waiting to deliver sentence. But the people had changed, or maybe he had just never seen them clearly before. The court was packed. Nobles in silk and velvet, their faces painted with curiosity and malice. Generals who had sent other men to die while they drank wine. Merchants who had grown fat on tariffs while farmers starved. And at the center of it all, on the throne, sat King Cedric Rowan. He looked old. That was Lucian's first thought. The man he remembered from childhood had been strong, broad-shouldered, commanding. This man was a husk, gray-faced, hollow-eyed. His hands gripped the armrests of the throne like he was holding on to keep from falling. And beside the throne, standing where a queen should stand, was Celine Voss. She was still beautiful. Time had not touched her the way it had touched Cedric. Her dark hair was pulled back from a face that could have been carved from ice. She wore black and silver, colors of mourning and ambition. When her eyes met Lucian's, she smiled. It was the smile of a woman watching a fly struggle in a web she had spent years spinning. On the other side of the throne stood Dorian, nervous, sweating despite the cold. His eyes would not meet Lucian's. The herald's voice rang out. Prince Lucian Rowan, son of Cedric Rowan, summoned to answer charges of treason. Lucian walked forward. His boots echoed in the silence. He stopped 10 feet from the throne, did not kneel, just stood there, covered in road dust and old blood, staring at the father who had never wanted him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Cedric cleared his throat. His voice was rough, like it hurt to use. "Lucian." "Your Majesty," Lucian said. His tone was flat, empty of everything. Cedric flinched. "You came. You summoned me. I obey the crown even when the crown does not acknowledge me." A murmur ran through the court. Celine's smile widened. Cedric's jaw tightened. "You stand accused of serious crimes," Cedric said, reading from a parchment someone had placed in his hand. "Unlawful command of royal forces, conspiracy against the throne, inciting rebellion among the common people." Lucian almost laughed. It came out as a bitter exhale. "I saved your kingdom. That is not for you to decide." "Then who decides?" Lucian's voice rose just slightly. "The generals who ran when the enemy came? The nobles who hid behind their walls while villages burned? Or maybe her?" He pointed at Celine. The court erupted. Gasps, shouts. Celine did not move, did not react. She just watched Lucian with those cold, calculating eyes. "You will not speak to Lady Voss in that manner," Cedric snapped. "Why not?" Lucian took a step forward. Guards shifted, hands on sword hilts. "Because she shares your bed? Because she whispers poison in your ear every night and you are too weak to tell her no? How dare you?" "I dare because I have nothing left to lose." Lucian's voice cracked through the hall like a whip. "You took everything from me before I could even walk. You gave me a mother who died of a broken heart. You gave me a childhood in a frozen fortress. You gave me a life where every person I met knew I was trash you threw away. And then, when enemies came to burn your kingdom, I bled for it anyway. I fought for people who mocked me. I led men who should have spit on me. I did everything you never did. And this is my reward?" He spread his arms. "A trial. Like I am the criminal." The silence after his words was so complete you could hear breathing. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman was crying softly. Cedric stared at his son. His mouth opened, closed. For the first time in 18 years, he looked at Lucian and really saw him. Saw the scars, the exhaustion, the broken thing he had created and abandoned. "Lucian," Cedric whispered. His voice was raw. Before he could finish, Celine spoke. Her voice was smooth, calm, deadly. How touching. The bastard prince plays the victim so well. Lucian turned to her. Their eyes met, two predators recognizing each other. "You should be careful, my lady," Lucian said softly. "Victims have a way of surviving." "Do they?" Celine descended the steps, moving like a snake, graceful and venomous. "Tell me, Prince, how do you explain these?" She gestured. A servant came forward carrying a wooden box. Opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them. "These were found in a search of your camp," Celine said. "Correspondence with General Castor of the Kyle Empire. Planning the invasion, coordinating your defense just well enough to look like a hero while ensuring the kingdom would be weakened for a future strike." Lucian stared at the letters. He had never seen them before in his life. "Those are fake. Of course you would say that." Celine picked one up, unfolded it, read aloud. "The king is weak. The kingdom is ripe for taking. Hold the border long enough to earn their trust, then strike when they are defenseless. Signed with your seal, Prince Lucian." "That is not my seal." Celine held it up. The wax imprint was unmistakable. The rowan tree, the crown, Lucian's mark, or a perfect forgery. He looked at Cedric. "You believe this?" The king said nothing. His face was gray. You actually believe, Lucian said slowly, that I spent a month freezing and bleeding and watching men die beside me, all as part of some grand betrayal? Still nothing. Something cold and final settled in Lucian's chest. Not rage, not even hurt, just understanding. His father was never going to choose him. Not today. Not ever. Cedric Rowan would rather believe his son was a traitor than admit he had destroyed his own family for a woman who had played him like an instrument for 20 years. Lady Mira's voice rang out from the back of the hall. "Those letters are lies!" "Silence," a guard barked. She pushed forward anyway. "I fought beside Prince Lucian. I saw him lead. I saw him bleed. He is no traitor." "And you are compromised," Celine said smoothly. "A minor noble desperate for relevance. Of course you would defend him. You probably helped him plan this." Mira's face went white with fury. "You poisonous—" "Enough," Cedric said. His voice was quiet, broken, but final. He looked at Lucian. "The evidence is clear." Lucian laughed. It was a terrible sound, empty and echoing. "You are going to do it. You are actually going to execute me for treason." Cedric closed his eyes. "I have no choice. There's always a choice, Father." Lucian spat the last word like a curse. "You just never make the right one." "Take him," Cedric said. Guards moved forward. Lucian did not resist. He let them grab his arms, start to drag him toward the door. He looked back over his shoulder at Celine. She was smiling. At Dorian, pale and shaking. At his father, hollowed out and pathetic. "This is not over," Lucian said. "Yes," Celine replied softly. "It is." The guards pulled him through the door. The last thing Lucian saw was his father's face. Not angry, not cold, just infinitely sad. Then the door closed. But they threw him in the dungeon, not the cells for common criminals. A special chamber deep beneath the palace, reserved for traitors and fallen nobles. Stone walls slick with moisture. A single torch that barely pushed back the darkness. Chains bolted to the floor. They locked him in and left. Lucian sat against the wall and let his head fall back. He was not afraid. Fear required hope. And hope was something he had burned through a long time ago. He thought about Tormund, probably drinking himself stupid by now. About Cade and the soldiers who had followed him. About Mira, probably under arrest herself. About his mother, dead in the frozen ground at Grimstone Keep. "I tried," he whispered to the darkness. "I actually tried." No answer, just the distant drip of water and his own breathing. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time stopped meaning anything. They brought him water once, stale bread. He drank, did not eat. His stomach could not hold it. Then footsteps, echoing down the corridor. Multiple sets. Torchlight growing brighter. The door opened. 3 men entered. One was the headsman carrying the tools of his trade. The other 2 were priests, there to offer final words and forgiveness. But behind them came someone else. Dorian. He stood in the doorway, backlit by torches, looking like a boy pretending to be a man. He gestured. "Leave us." The headsman hesitated. "My lord," the king said. "I said leave." They left. The door closed. Dorian and Lucian alone in the cell. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Dorian said, "I did not want this." Lucian looked at him, really said nothing. "I mean it," Dorian continued. His voice was shaking. "You were never supposed to come back. You were supposed to die in the north." Celine said, "Of course she did." Lucian's voice was flat. "Let me guess. She told you I was a threat, that I would take your throne, that the only way to secure your future was to destroy me." Dorian's silence was answer enough. "And you believed her," Lucian said. "Because you are weak? Because you have spent your whole life letting her make your choices? Just like my father. I am not like him. No, you are worse. He is a broken man who made terrible mistakes. You are a coward who knows exactly what you are doing." Dorian's face flushed. "I came here to offer you a way out." Lucian looked up. "Go on." "Confess. Publicly. Admit you conspired with the enemy. Beg for mercy. Cedric is weak enough that he might spare your life. Exile instead of execution. And in return, you disappear. Forever. No claims to the throne, no coming back. You become a ghost. Lucian stared at him. Then he laughed, low and bitter. You want me to confess to crimes I did not commit, so you can sleep better at night. I want you to live. No. You want me to stop being a problem. There is a difference. Dorian stepped closer. His eyes were desperate. Please. I do not want your blood on my hands. Then you should have thought of that before you helped her frame me. Dorian recoiled like he had been slapped. You think I do not know? Lucian said. Those letters. My seal. Only a handful of people had access to that. You were one of them. You helped her forge them. Maybe you even believed you were doing the right thing, protecting your future. But here's the truth, Dorian. When this is over, when I am dead and you are sitting on that throne, it will not be yours. It will be hers. She will control you just like she controlled my father. And one day, when you are no longer useful, she will destroy you too. Stop. That is what people like Selene do. They find weak men and hollow them out from the inside until there is nothing left but a shell doing what they are told. My father let her do it. You are letting her do it. And when she is done with you, there will not be enough left to bury. Dorian's breath was coming fast, shallow. He looked like he might be sick. Get out, Lucian said quietly. Go tell her I refused. Go play your part. But when it all falls apart, remember I warned you. Dorian stared at him. His mouth opened, closed. No words came. He turned and walked to the door, stopped, looked back. I am sorry, he whispered. No, you are not, Lucian said. But you will be. Dorian left. The door slammed shut with a sound like the end of the world. They came for him at dawn. 6 guards. The headsman. No priest this time. They did not ask if he had final words. Just unlocked the chains, hauled him to his feet, dragged him up the stairs toward the courtyard where the block waited. Lucian did not fight. There was no point. He let them pull him through corridors he had never walked, past tapestries showing the glory of House Rowan, kings and queens who had built this kingdom stone by stone. Now it was going to watch one of their own die. They emerged into gray morning light. The courtyard was packed. Nobles on balconies, soldiers lining the walls, common people pressed against the gates trying to see. Lucian saw faces he recognized. Generals who had refused to fight, merchants who had profited from corruption. And at the front, standing beside the throne they had brought out for the occasion, Cedric and Selene. His father looked like death. Selene looked like a woman who had already won. They brought Lucian to the center of the courtyard, made him kneel. His knees hit stone, cold, hard, final. The headsman took his position, tested the weight of the axe. It was sharp, freshly oiled. They were going to make this clean. A herald read the charges. Treason, conspiracy, crimes against the crown. His voice droned on meaningless words that no one was really listening to. Lucian looked up, caught his father's eye. Cedric stared back. There were tears running down his face. Silent, useless. Coward, Lucian mouthed. Cedric looked away. The herald finished. The headsman raised the axe, and then someone shouted from the gates, "Wait!" Everyone turned. A man was running into the courtyard. No, not a man. A boy. Barely 16. He wore the uniform of a Kyle soldier, ripped and blood-stained. He collapsed in the center of the courtyard, gasping. Guards rushed forward, grabbed him. "Who are you?" The boy looked up. His face was bruised, beaten. "I am a prisoner. Escaped. From General Castor's camp." Selene's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Too fast for most to see. Lucian saw it. "What is this?" Cedric demanded. The boy reached into his shirt with shaking hands, pulled out a bundle of letters. I stole these from the general's tent before I ran. He said," his voice broke, "he said they were insurance, proof of his alliance." He held them up. An alliance with a woman named Selene Voss. The courtyard erupted. Cedric stood. "What?" The boy was crying now. "She has been working with the Kyle Empire for 5 years, sending intelligence, weakening your defenses. The invasion was her idea. She promised General Castor the kingdom once you were dead." "You lie!" Dorian shouted. The boy turned to him. "And you, she promised you the throne. But the letters say once Cedric is gone, Castor was supposed to kill you too. Dorian went white. No, Celine said. Her voice was still calm, still controlled, but the mask was cracking. This is a fabrication, a desperate attempt. The boy threw the letters at her feet. Read them. A noble stepped forward, picked one up, unfolded it. His face went pale. He looked at Celine. This is your handwriting. Lies, Celine hissed. She was backing away now. They are all lies. But other nobles were grabbing letters, reading, their faces shifting from confusion to horror to rage. The evidence was overwhelming, detailed, years of correspondence, plans, payments, troop movements, everything. Cedric looked like he was going to collapse. Celine, she spun on him. Do not look at me like that. I did this for us. For the kingdom you were too weak to rule properly. You betrayed us, Cedric whispered. I saved us! Her voice was sharp now, raw. You were destroying this kingdom with your guilt and your pathetic love for a dead queen. Someone had to be strong. Someone had to make the hard choices. By selling us to our enemies, by doing what you could not. She was screaming now. I gave you everything. I made you powerful. I made you relevant. And all you ever wanted was to cry over a woman who never loved you and a son who should have been drowned at birth. The courtyard went silent. Lucian still knelt by the block, still chained, but he was smiling, cold and sharp. Celine saw it, her face twisted. You. This is your doing. You brought that boy here. Lucian said nothing. You planned this. No, Lucian said quietly. I just waited for you to destroy yourself. People like you always do. Celine lunged at him. Guards grabbed her, pulled her back. She thrashed, screamed, cursed. But they held her. Cedric was on his feet now, shaking, his voice barely audible. Arrest her. Arrest Lady Voss. And anyone who helped her. Guards moved. Celine fought like a wild animal. They dragged her toward the dungeon. As she passed Lucian, she spat at him. Her saliva hit his cheek. He did not wipe it away, just watched her disappear into the palace. Then Cedric looked at Dorian. The boy was frozen, terrified. Did you know? Cedric asked. Dorian's mouth worked. I thought, did you help her forge the letters against your cousin? Silence. Answer me. Yes! Dorian broke, collapsed to his knees. Yes, I helped. She said he was dangerous, that he would destroy everything. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. You were protecting yourself, Cedric said. His voice was dead. You are just like her, selfish, cowardly, weak. He turned to the guards. Take him. House arrest. He is not to leave his chambers until I decide what to do with him. They dragged Dorian away. He was sobbing. And then the courtyard was silent again. Cedric walked slowly down the steps, crossed to where Lucian knelt, looked down at his son. Forgive me, Cedric whispered. Lucian looked up at him. His face was empty. No forgiveness there, no anger either, just exhaustion. Unlock him, Cedric ordered. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The chains fell away. Lucian stood. His legs were shaking. He had not stood in 2 days. Cedric reached out as if to embrace him. Lucian stepped back. Do not. Cedric's hand fell. His face crumpled. I did not know. I swear I did not know. You did not want to know, Lucian said. There is a difference. I was a fool. You were worse than a fool. You were a coward who let his obsession destroy everything. Your wife, your son, your kingdom. All because you could not see past a woman who was using you. I loved her. No. You needed her to tell you that you mattered. That is not love. That is desperation. Cedric stared at him, then nodded slowly. You are right. About all of it. He turned to face the court, raised his voice so everyone could hear. Prince Lucian Rowan is innocent of all charges. He saved this kingdom while I nearly destroyed it. From this moment forward, he is recognized as my legitimate son and heir to the throne of Valadorn. The courtyard erupted again, some cheering, some stunned, some angry. Lucian did not react. He just stood there, covered in dungeon filth, staring at the father who had finally, far too late, done the right thing. You can have your throne, Lucian said quietly. I am done. He turned and walked away. Cedric called after him. "Lucian, please!" Lucian did not look back. He walked through the crowd. People parted for him like water. He reached the gates, stepped out into the city, and kept walking. Lucian walked for 3 days without stopping. He did not ride, did not eat, barely slept. He just moved, one foot in front of the other, putting distance between himself and the palace, the father who had finally claimed him, the throne he had been offered like a consolation prize after 18 years of abandonment. His boots wore through. His feet bled. He did not care. Pain was the only thing that felt real anymore. Lady Mira found him on the 4th day. He was sitting beside a frozen stream, staring at nothing. She dismounted, walked over, sat down beside him without asking permission. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, she said, "You saved the kingdom." "Did I? Celine is in chains. Her allies are being arrested." The invasion collapsed when Castor lost his inside source. "You won." Lucian laughed. "It was a broken sound. I did not win anything. I just survived long enough to watch everyone else destroy themselves. That is what winning looks like sometimes." He looked at her. Her face was hard, weathered from the northern campaigns, but her eyes held something gentle, something that looked almost like understanding. "Why did you follow me?" he asked. "Because someone needed to." "That is not an answer." "Yes, it is." She picked up a stone, tossed it into the stream. The ice cracked. "When I was 16, my father tried to marry me off to a lord twice my age, fat, cruel, rich enough that my family did not care what kind of man he was. I ran, took my father's sword and horse and ran north. Lived in the woods for 2 months before he stopped looking. Eventually came back, but on my terms, with my own soldiers, my own power." She turned to him. "You know what I learned?" "What?" "That the world only respects people who refuse to be broken by it. You could have confessed, could have taken Dorian's deal, could have run years ago when your father first threw you away. But you did not. You stood there and made them look at you. That is power. Real power, not crowns or thrones. The ability to stand in front of people who want you dead and refuse to disappear." Lucian stared at the ice. "What if I do not want the power? Then you are a fool. Because the alternative is letting people like Celine keep winning, keep destroying. You think she is the only one? There are 100 others just like her, waiting for weak kings and desperate princes, ready to carve up kingdoms for their own benefit. If you walk away, you leave the door open for the next one." "I am tired, Mira. I know. I have been fighting my whole life. For scraps, for acknowledgement, for the right to just exist without being ashamed. And now they want me to fight for a throne I never asked for." Mira stood, offered her hand. "Then fight for something else. Fight for the people who followed you. For Tormund? For Cade? For every soldier who bled beside you because they believed you were better than the men who came before. Fight because you are the only one left who gives a damn about this kingdom instead of just using it." Lucian looked at her hand, calloused, scarred, strong. He took it. She pulled him to his feet. "Come on," she said. "We have work to do." They rode back to the capital together. This time, Lucian did not walk through the gates like a condemned man. He rode, head up, eyes forward. The people watched him pass. Some whispered, some knelt. A few threw flowers. Lucian ignored them all. Public opinion was a wind that shifted direction every hour. Today he was a hero. Tomorrow he might be a villain again. He had learned long ago not to trust crowds. The palace was in chaos, nobles scattering like rats, officials being dragged out in chains. Selena's network had run deep, and tearing it out root by root was bloody work. Executions, exiles, confiscations. The kingdom was cannibalizing itself, trying to purge the infection. Cedric was in the throne room. He looked worse than before. Sick. Fading. When Lucian entered, the king stood, tried to smile. It did not reach his eyes. "You came back." "I came back," Lucian said. His voice was flat. "But not for you." Cedric nodded slowly. "That is fair. Where is she?" "The dungeons, awaiting trial." "There will not be a trial." Cedric hesitated. "Lucian, the law is a luxury for peacetime. This is not peacetime. We are still at war. The Kale army is regrouping. Celene's allies are still embedded in half the noble houses. If we waste time with trials and procedures, this kingdom will tear itself apart before the enemy even crosses the border again. Then what do you propose? Lucian stepped closer. His eyes were cold, hard. I propose you step down. The room went silent. Guards shifted. Advisors stared. Cedric's face went pale. What? You are sick. Anyone can see it. You have maybe a year left. Maybe less. In that time, you will try to hold this kingdom together while fighting your own guilt and the remnants of Celine's conspiracy. You will fail. And when you do, Dorian will try to seize power, and we will have civil war. I have named you my heir. Malmets, names mean nothing. Power means everything. And right now, you do not have any. Lucian's voice was merciless. You spent 20 years destroying your own authority. You cannot rebuild it in a year. But I can. How? Because the people do not love me. They fear me. They watched me burn a village to stop an invasion. They watched me walk into this palace and survive a rigged trial. They know I am not some soft prince who will forgive and forget. I am the man who does what needs to be done. And right now, that is what this kingdom needs. Cedric stared at him. His son, the boy he had abandoned, now standing before him like a judge delivering sentence. You want me to abdicate? Yes. And if I refuse, then I leave. Take my soldiers. Let this kingdom collapse. And when the enemy comes back, there will be no one left to stop them. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered without emotion, without malice, just cold truth. Cedric's legs gave out. He sat heavily on the throne, put his face in his hands. When did you become so ruthless? He whispered. The day you sent me to Grimstone Keep. Cedric looked up. Tears ran down his face. I am sorry. For everything. I know, Lucian said quietly. But sorry does not rebuild kingdoms. He turned to the court, raised his voice. King Cedric Rowan is abdicating the throne effective immediately. I am assuming command as King Lucian I. Any noble who has a problem with that can leave now. The rest of you prepare for war. We have 2 weeks before the Kael army regroups. That is how long you have to decide whose side you are on. No one moved. Good. Lucian turned to the guards. Bring me General Castor's head. I want it on a pike by sunset. The guards scrambled to obey. Lucian looked at his father one last time. You can stay in the palace. Live out whatever time you have left in comfort. I will not take that from you. But the crown is mine now. Cedric nodded. He looked small, broken, a man who had outlived his own story. Lucian walked out of the throne room, and for the first time in his life, he felt nothing. The War Council met that night. 15 generals, 10 nobles with military experience. Mira. Tormund, still recovering but refusing to stay in bed. Cade. And Lucian, sitting at the head of the table where his father used to sit. He did not waste time with pleasantries. The Kael army is 30 miles north, 3,000 men left. General Castor is dead, but his second in command, a man named Varric, has taken control. He is smarter than Castor, more vicious. He knows we are weak. He is going to hit us hard and fast before we can consolidate. One of the generals, an old man named Corvin, spoke up. We have 5,000 soldiers in the capital, another 3,000 scattered across the provinces. If we call them all in, we do not have time. Varric will march in a week, maybe less. We need to meet him in the field. That is suicide, another general said. We barely survived last time. Last time we were defending. Now we are attacking. The room erupted. Shouts, arguments. Lucian let them go for 30 seconds. Then he slammed his fist on the table. Silence. Everyone stopped. Listen to me, Lucian said, his voice low and deadly. I do not care if you think it is suicide. I do not care if you are afraid. The only thing that matters is this. If we let Varric dictate the terms of this war, we lose. He has fewer men, but he has momentum. He has morale. His soldiers think we are weak, that we got lucky once, but will fold when real pressure comes. We need to prove them wrong. How? Corvin demanded. By doing what they do not expect. We march tonight. We cover the distance in 4 days instead of 6. We hit them at dawn when they are not ready, and we do not stop until every last one of them is dead or running back across the border." "You are talking about a forced march in winter," Mira said carefully. "We will lose men to cold and exhaustion before we even reach the enemy." "I know. Is it worth it?" Lucian looked at her. "Yes. Because the alternative is sitting here waiting to be destroyed. At least this way we die on our feet." Tormund grinned. "Now you sound like a king." The generals looked at each other. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. "Fine," Corvin said. "We march tonight. But if this goes wrong, boy, it is on your head." "Everything is on my head now," Lucian said. "That is what a crown means." They marched at midnight, 5,000 soldiers. No baggage train, no siege equipment, just men and weapons and the kind of desperation that makes people capable of impossible things. They moved fast, covering ground in half the expected time. Soldiers collapsed from exhaustion. Officers screamed at them to get up. Some did not. They were left behind. Lucian rode at the front, did not sleep, did not eat except for handfuls of dried meat. He drove himself harder than anyone, and the soldiers saw it. This king who had been forgotten, who had been sentenced to die, who had taken the throne not because he wanted it, but because no one else would do what needed to be done. They began calling him the Winter King, the man who burned villages and marched through blizzards and asked nothing from his soldiers he would not do himself. On the third night, they made camp 10 miles from the Kael position. Scouts reported back. "Enemy unaware, still fortifying, expecting us in 3 more days." "Good," Lucian said. "We attack at dawn." He gathered his commanders, drew the battle plan in the dirt with a stick. We split into 3 groups. Mira takes the left flank, Corvin takes the right, I take the center. We hit them from 3 sides at once. No mercy, no prisoners. We end this tomorrow. "And if it does not work?" someone asked. "Then we die," Lucian said simply. "But at least we die trying." That night he walked through the camp. Soldiers sat around fires, sharpening weapons, writing last letters they hoped someone would deliver. They looked up as he passed. Some nodded, some saluted, some just stared. Lucian stopped at one fire. A young soldier, maybe 18, staring at his hands, shaking. "First battle?" Lucian asked. The boy looked up. "Yes, my lord." "Afraid?" "Terrified." Lucian sat down beside him. "Good. Fear keeps you alive. It is the men who are not afraid who die first." "How do you do it?" the boy whispered. "How do you keep moving when you are so scared?" Lucian stared into the fire. "You find something worth dying for, and you hold on to it so tight that fear does not have room to take root. For some men it is family. For others it is honor. For me it is simpler. I am tired of watching people I care about die while cowards sit on thrones and do nothing." The boy nodded slowly. "What if I run?" "Then you run. No one will blame you, but you will spend the rest of your life wondering who you could have been if you had stayed." He stood, walked on. Behind him, the boy sat up straighter, stopped shaking. Lucian found Mira near the command tent. She was checking her gear, tightening straps, testing the edge of her blade. "You ready?" he asked. "No." She glanced at him. "Are you?" "No." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mira said, "If we die tomorrow, we are not dying tomorrow. But if we do, I want you to know, I am glad I followed you." Lucian looked at her, really looked, saw the woman who had charged into battle to save him, who had stood by him when everyone else ran, who had tracked him down when he tried to disappear. "I am glad you did too," he said quietly. She smiled. "Then let us make sure we survive long enough to celebrate." Dawn came cold and sharp as a knife. The army moved into position under cover of darkness. 3 groups, silent as ghosts. The Kyle camp sprawled before them, tents in neat rows, fires burning low, sentries half asleep. Lucian sat on his horse at the center of the line. Behind him, 2,000 soldiers, men who had followed him through hell, who had burned villages and frozen in trenches and bled on ice, who had every reason to hate him and instead chose loyalty. He looked left, saw Mira's signal. Ready. He looked right, saw Corvin's signal. Ready. He drew his sword. The steel rang in the silence like a bell. For Valadorn, he said, his voice carried across the lines. Not loud, did not need to be. For the people who followed us, for the ones who died believing we could win, for every person who said we were nothing and lived to regret it. He raised his blade. Now make them remember us. The army roared, 3,000 voices splitting the dawn. They charged. The KL camp erupted into chaos, sentries screaming, soldiers stumbling out of tents half-dressed, officers shouting orders no one could hear over the din. Lucian's forces hit them like a hammer. Steel clashed. Men screamed. Blood turned the snow into red mud. Lucian fought at the front, his sword a blur. A Kyle soldier lunged. Lucian sidestepped, brought his blade down through the man's collarbone. Another came from the right. Lucian spun, caught the attack on his sword, drove his boot into the man's knee. Bone cracked. The soldier fell. Lucian finished him and kept moving. Around him, his soldiers were animals. No formations now, no tactics, just raw violence. The kind of fighting that comes when you know you are outnumbered, and your only chance is to be more vicious than the enemy can handle. Mira's flank crashed into the left side of the Kael camp. Her soldiers were smaller in number, but they fought with the fury of people who had been underestimated their whole lives. She cut through enemy lines, her blade dancing, her voice ringing out commands even as blood sprayed across her face. Corvin's flank hit the right, slower, more methodical. Old soldiers who knew how to pace themselves. They advanced like a glacier, unstoppable, inevitable. But the center was where the real killing happened. Lucian pushed deeper into the camp. His soldiers followed. They were a spear driving into the heart of the enemy. Kael forces rallied, formed a defensive line, pushed back. Men fell on both sides. The wounded screamed. The dying clutched at the living. And then Lucian saw him. Varric. The Kael commander stood in the center of his camp, rallying his troops. He was a giant of a man, 7 feet tall, muscles like iron. He carried a warhammer that could crush a skull with a glancing blow. His voice boomed over the battle. "Hold the line! Do not let them break through!" Lucian spurred his horse forward, cut through the press of bodies. Soldiers saw him coming. Some moved, some did not move fast enough. He reached Varric, dismounted, stood 20 feet away. Varric turned, saw him. His eyes narrowed. "You must be the prince they talk about, the one who burned his own people." Lucian did not answer, just raised his sword. Varric grinned. He hefted his hammer. "Come then, boy king, let me teach you what real war looks like." They closed. Varric swung first. The hammer came down like the fist of a god. Lucian rolled left. The weapon hit the ground where he had been standing and buried itself 3 inches deep. Lucian lunged. His blade scraped across Varric's armor, found a gap under the arm, bit deep. Varric roared, ripped the hammer free, swung horizontally. Lucian ducked. The weapon whistled over his head. He came up inside Varric's reach, drove his sword toward the man's throat. Varric caught the blade with his gauntleted hand. Squeezed. The steel groaned, then snapped. Lucian stumbled back. Varric kicked him in the chest. He flew backward, hit the ground hard. His ribs screamed, could not breathe. Varric advanced, raised the hammer for the killing blow. "You fought well," he said. "But you are just a boy playing at war." The hammer came down. Lucian rolled. The weapon hit empty ground. He grabbed the broken half of his sword, lunged, drove the jagged blade up under Varric's jaw. Through the soft tissue, into the brain, Varric's eyes went wide. Blood poured from his mouth. He made a wet, choking sound. Then he fell. Lucian stood, gasping, his hand still on the broken sword buried in Varric's skull. Blood ran down his arm, his chest burned, his vision swam. But he was alive. He yanked the blade free, held it high. "Your commander is dead," he roared. "Surrender or join him." The Kael soldiers saw Varric's body, saw the Winter King standing over it, covered in blood, holding a broken sword like a banner. They broke. Some dropped their weapons, some ran, some kept fighting but without direction, without hope. Lucian's army tore through them. By noon, the battle was over. 1,200 Kael soldiers dead, 800 captured. The rest scattered into the wilderness. Lucian's forces had lost 600 men, too many, but they had won. Lucian stood in the center of the carnage. His soldiers surrounded him, cheering, chanting his name. Mira rode up, blood-soaked and grinning. Tormund limped over, his shoulder wound reopened, but his eyes alive. "We did it," Tormund said. "We actually did it." Lucian looked around at the dead, the dying, the men who would never go home. "Did we?" he said quietly. But his soldiers did not hear the doubt. They only saw victory. The journey back to the capital took a week, slower this time. Wounded to carry, prisoners to guard, dead to bury. By the time they reached the city, word had already spread. The Winter King had destroyed the Kyle army. The invasion was over. The kingdom was saved. The people lined the streets, threw flowers, cheered, cried. Some called him a hero. Some called him a savior. Lucian heard none of it. He rode through the gates with his eyes forward, his face stone. They brought him to the palace. The throne room was packed. Nobles, merchants, generals, everyone who mattered. They all stared as he entered, covered in blood and road dirt, limping from a dozen injuries, but walking, still walking. He climbed the steps to the throne, turned, looked out at the court. "This is what ruling looks like," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Not silk robes and pretty words, not compromises and half measures. Blood, sacrifice. Doing what needs to be done even when it breaks you. My father forgot that. He let his feelings destroy this kingdom. I will not make that mistake. He sat down on the throne. From this day forward, Valadorn changes. No more noble families buying positions. No more corruption. No more weakness. Everyone earns their place or they lose it. That includes me. The moment I stop serving this kingdom, you have my permission to throw me out. He looked at them, one by one. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Good. Now get out. All of you. I have work to do. They left. Slowly. Staring. Whispering. But they left. Only Mira stayed. She walked up the steps, stood beside the throne. "You know they are going to test you," she said. "Every noble family with an axe to grind, every rival who thinks you are too young or too harsh, they are going to push until you break." "Let them," Lucian said. "I have been breaking my whole life. I am still here." She smiled. "Then let them come." Nki. That night, Lucian stood alone in the royal chambers. His chambers now. He looked around at the tapestries, the furniture, the luxury he had been denied his entire life. It all felt empty. He walked to the window, looked out over the city, lights in every house, smoke from chimneys, life continuing because people like him bled to protect it. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." It was Cedric. He looked terrible, thin, gray, barely able to stand, but he came in anyway, closed the door behind him. "I wanted to see you," he said. "Why?" "Because you are my son, and I am dying." Lucian turned, looked at the man who had abandoned him, who had finally, far too late, tried to make it right. "How long?" "Weeks. Maybe less. The physicians say it is a sickness of the blood. Nothing to be done." Cedric walked closer, stopped a few feet away. "I know you do not forgive me. I would not either, but I need you to know everything I did, every mistake. It destroyed me just as much as it destroyed you. More, maybe. Because I have to live with knowing I threw away the only thing that mattered. And what was that? You, my son. The only honest thing I ever had." Tears ran down his face. "I am so proud of you, Lucian. You became everything I could not." Lucian stared at him, felt nothing, no warmth, no anger, just emptiness. "Thank you," he said. His voice was flat. "You can go now." Cedric's face crumpled. He nodded, turned, walked to the door. "Father." Cedric stopped, looked back. "I do not forgive you," Lucian said, "and I never will. But I understand why you did it. Weakness is easy. Strength is what kills you." Cedric nodded again. Then he left. Lucian stood alone in the royal chambers, king of a broken kingdom, son of a broken man. And outside, in the dungeons far below, Selene Voss sat in chains waiting for the judgment that would come at dawn. Dawn came slow and gray the morning they brought Selene Voss to the throne room for judgment. Lucian had not slept. He sat in the royal chambers staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the ways a man could destroy himself chasing things that were never real. His father had done it. Dorian had done it. Even Celine, in her own twisted way, had done it. She had built an empire of lies and convinced herself it was love. Now it was time to pay. The throne room was packed by the time he entered. Every noble who still had a title, every merchant who mattered, soldiers lining the walls. The common people pressed against the doors, trying to see. They wanted blood. After everything Celine had done, the fires she had set, the men who had died because of her betrayal, they wanted to watch her burn. Lucian understood that hunger. He had felt it himself in the cold nights at Grimstone Keep. The desire to see the people who hurt you suffer the way you suffered. To make them pay in screams and tears. It was human, natural. But it was also the same poison that had destroyed his father. Revenge was just another kind of obsession. An obsession was what turned kings into monsters. He sat on the throne. Mira stood to his right, Tormund to his left, Cade and the other commanders behind him. All the people who had bled for him, who had believed in him when belief was a currency worth more than gold. "Bring her in," Lucian said. The doors opened. Celine walked between two guards. No chains. Lucian had ordered that. She was not some common criminal to be dragged in shackles. She was a woman who had nearly destroyed a kingdom with nothing but words and patience. That deserved a certain respect, even in defeat. She wore black. Her hair was loose, falling around her shoulders. Her face was calm. No tears, no begging. She walked to the center of the room and stopped, looked up at Lucian on the throne. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the forgotten prince and the woman who had tried to erase him. "Celine Voss," Lucian said. His voice echoed in the silence. "You stand accused of treason, conspiracy with foreign enemies, the murder of Valadorn soldiers through deliberate sabotage, and the corruption of the crown itself. How do you answer these charges?" Celine smiled. It was a small, sad thing. Guilty. On all counts. The crowd murmured. They had expected denials, excuses, pleas for mercy. Instead, she gave them nothing but the truth. "Why?" someone shouted from the crowd. Celine turned, looked at the faces staring at her with hate. "Because your king was weak. Because this kingdom was rotting from the inside and no one had the courage to cut out the infection. I did what needed to be done." "You sold us to our enemies," Mira snapped. "You got people killed." "Yes." Celine's voice was steady. "I did. And I would do it again. Because the alternative was watching Valadorn collapse under the weight of its own incompetence. Cedric Rowan was a coward. His son was an embarrassment. The nobles were parasites. Someone needed to take control. So you decided it should be you. Why not me? I was smarter than all of you, more ruthless, more willing to do what survival required. And I almost succeeded. Would have succeeded if not for him." She pointed at Lucian. "The boy no one wanted. The mistake. The thing thrown away and forgotten. You were supposed to die in the north, Prince. Instead, you became the one variable I could not predict." Lucian stood, walked down the steps slowly, stopped 5 feet from her. "You are right about one thing," he said quietly. "My father was weak. The kingdom was rotting. But you did not try to save it. You tried to own it. There is a difference." "Is there?" Celine tilted her head. "You sit on that throne now because you were willing to burn villages and kill men and do all the things I did. We are not so different, you and I. We are nothing alike." "No. You took the crown by force. You terrified the nobles into submission. You rule through fear and respect, not love. That is exactly what I would have done." Lucian stared at her. She was not wrong. He had done terrible things, made choices that kept him awake at night, become the kind of man who could order executions without flinching. But there was one difference, one thing that separated them. "I did it for them," he said, gesturing to the crowd. "You did it for yourself. And that makes you better?" "No. It just makes me necessary." He turned away, walked back to the throne, sat. The court waited, silence so thick you could choke on it. "Celine Voss, you will be executed at sunset," Lucian said. His voice was flat. Final. No torture. No public spectacle. A clean death. That is more mercy than you deserve, but it is what I am offering. Celine nodded slowly. She had known this was coming. Had probably known since the moment the boy with the stolen letters appeared in the courtyard. "Can I ask one favor?" she said. "Speak. Let me see Cedric. One last time before I die." The room erupted, nobles shouting, "How dare she? After everything." Lucian raised his hand. Silence fell. "Why should I allow that?" "Because he loved me." Celine's voice cracked just slightly. For the first time, something human showed through. "Whatever you think of me, whatever I did, that was real. He loved me. And I loved him, in my own broken way. Love is not an excuse for treason, I know. But it is a reason. And I would like to say goodbye to the only person who ever looked at me and saw something worth wanting." Lucien studied her. This woman who had destroyed his childhood, who had tried to erase him, who had sold his kingdom to enemies and smiled while doing it. He should say no, should deny her this last comfort, make her die alone and forgotten the way she had tried to make him disappear. But that was what she would have done, and he was not her. "1 hour," he said, "under guard. You do not touch him. You do not try to run. You say what you need to say, and then you go to your death. Understood?" "Understood. Take her to the king's chambers." The guards led her away. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Mira leaned close. "You are too merciful. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the villain. Cedric was in bed when they brought her in. He looked like a corpse already. Skin gray, eyes sunken, breathing shallow. He had maybe days left. Maybe hours. When he saw Celine, something flickered in those dying eyes. Recognition, pain, a grief so deep it had no words. "Celine," he whispered. She walked to his bedside. The guard stayed at the door. She knelt, took his hand. It was cold, fragile as paper. "Hello, my love." Cedric's eyes filled with tears. "They told me what you did. All of it." "I know. Why?" "Because I wanted to give you everything. Power, legacy. A kingdom that would remember your name, and you were too weak to take it yourself." He closed his eyes. "I trusted you. You loved me. Trust was just a side effect." "Was any of it real?" His voice broke. "Did you ever love me, or was I just a tool?" Celine was silent for a long moment. Her face was unreadable. Then she said, "I loved what you could have been. The king you should have been. Strong, ruthless, willing to do anything to protect what was yours. But you were too busy drowning in guilt over a dead wife and a son you never wanted. So I tried to shape you into something better, something worthy, by destroying everything I cared about. You did not care about them. You cared about being seen as a good man." "There is a difference." Cedric opened his eyes, looked at her, really looked. And what he saw there was not love, not really. Just ambition wearing love's face, a woman so hungry for power she had convinced herself manipulation was affection. "You are a monster," he said softly. "I know." Celine's voice was calm. "But so are you. You abandoned your son. You let your kingdom rot. You chose me over everything that mattered. We are both monsters, Cedric. At least I was honest about it." She leaned forward, kissed his forehead. "Goodbye, my king." She stood, walked to the door, did not look back. Cedric lay there, staring at the ceiling, tears running down his face. A man who had wasted his entire life chasing a woman who had never been real. "Guards," he called weakly. "Yes, your majesty, tell my son, tell Lucian, I am sorry, for everything." "We will tell him, and tell him." Cedric's breath rattled. "Tell him he was the only good thing I ever made." Tim. They executed Celine at sunset. No public square, no cheering crowd. Lucian had the courtyard cleared, just him. Mira, Tormund, a priest to say words over the body, and the headsman. Celine walked to the block calmly. No last words, no speeches. She knelt, placed her head on the wood, looked at Lucian one last time. "You will make a better king than he ever was," she said, "but you will be just as lonely." The axe fell. Her head rolled into the basket. Blood pooled on the stones. The headsman cleaned his blade. Mira turned away. Tormund spat. Lucian stood there watching as they wrapped the body. He felt nothing, No satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness. The kind that comes when you realize vengeance does not heal anything. It just creates more silence. Is it done? Mira asked quietly. Yes. Lucian turned away. It is done. They walked back into the palace together. Behind them, servants cleaned up the blood. By morning, there would be no sign Celine Voss had ever existed. Just a name in the histories. A cautionary tale about ambition and obsession. But in the dark corners of the kingdom, people would remember her differently. Some would call her a villain. Others would call her a woman who dared to reach for power in a world that told her to stay small. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between. Cedric died 3 days later. Peaceful. In his sleep. The physician said his heart simply gave out. Lucian thought it was more accurate to say his heart had given out years ago. The body just took a while to catch up. They buried him with full honors. A king's funeral. Banners and trumpets and speeches about legacy. Lucian stood at the graveside and said nothing. When they asked if he wanted to speak, he shook his head. What was there to say? That his father had been weak? That he had destroyed his own family? That he had died alone and broken, mourning a woman who had never really loved him? Everyone already knew. Speaking it aloud would not make it more true. After the ceremony, after the nobles dispersed and the crowd thinned, Lucian stood alone at the grave, staring at the fresh earth, thinking about the man beneath it, the king who could have been great but chose to be small. Goodbye, father, Lucian said quietly. I wish I could say I forgive you, but I cannot. Maybe someday, but not today. He turned and walked away, and for the first time since returning to the capital, he felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness, not healing, just space. Room to breathe without the weight of other people's choices crushing him. The first year of Lucian's reign was brutal. He restructured the entire kingdom from the ground up, removed corrupt officials, arrested nobles who had profited from Celine's schemes, lowered taxes on the poor and raised them on the wealthy, opened the royal granaries during a bad harvest, paid soldiers a living wage, reformed the courts so justice was not something you could buy. The nobles hated him, called him a tyrant, a commoner king. They tried to organize resistance. Lucian arrested the leaders and offered the rest a choice: fall in line or lose everything. Most fell in line. The common people loved him, not because he was kind. He was not. He was harsh and unforgiving, and he expected everyone to work as hard as he did. But he was fair. And fairness, in a kingdom that had known only corruption, was a revolutionary act. He rarely smiled, rarely laughed. He worked 18 hours a day and slept in his clothes more often than not. Mira told him he was going to burn himself out. Tormund told him he was going to die young if he kept pushing this hard. Lucian told them both he did not care. There was too much to fix, too many people depending on him. He could rest when the kingdom was stable. Not before. But late at night, alone in his chambers, he would stand at the window and look out over the city, at the lights in the houses, the smoke from the chimneys, the life continuing because he had chosen to carry the weight no one else would, and he would think about his mother, about Tormund's words from so many years ago, about the difference between surviving and living, about whether he had traded one kind of prison for another. 2 years into his reign, Lady Mira came to him with a proposal. They were in the war room, reviewing reports. Bandits in the eastern provinces. A trade dispute with a neighboring kingdom. The usual problems of governance. Mira set down her papers and looked at him. You need to marry. Lucian looked up. What? You are a king. You need an heir, stability, an alliance. You need to marry. I am 23 years old, which is old enough. Lucian, you have been ruling for 2 years. You have stabilized the kingdom, made enemies into allies, turned Valadorn into a power again. But it is all built on you. If you die tomorrow, everything collapses. You need a family, a legacy. I had a family once. It did not work out well. That was not your fault. Was it not? Lucian set down his own papers. My father destroyed himself and everyone around him because he could not separate duty from desire. I swore I would not make that mistake. I swore I would put the kingdom first, always. A wife, children. They would just be distractions. Or they would be the reason you stop working yourself to death. Mira's voice was gentle. You think you are serving the kingdom by sacrificing everything. But martyrs are not good rulers, Lucian. They are just men waiting to die. He stared at her. And who would you have me marry? Mira smiled. Someone who understands what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. Someone who has bled beside you. Someone who knows you are not perfect but chooses you anyway. She stepped closer. Someone like me. Lucian went very still. Mira, I am not asking for love. I know you do not have that to give. Not yet. Maybe never. But I'm asking for partnership. For two people who respect each other building something that lasts. We have fought together. We have survived together. We can rule together. He looked at her. Really looked. Saw the scars on her hands, the hard line of her jaw, the eyes that had seen the same horrors he had, and kept moving. She was not soft. She was not easy. She was steel wrapped in flesh. And she was offering him something he had never had. An equal. Yes, he said quietly. Mira blinked. Yes? Yes, I will marry you, not because I need an alliance, not because I need an heir, but because you are right. I am tired of being alone. She smiled. It was a rare thing, beautiful in its rarity. Then we have a deal, King Lucian. They married a month later. A small ceremony. No grand celebration, just the two of them, a priest and their closest allies. Tormund cried. Cade got drunk. Matthias gave a speech about partnership and governance that went on too long but made everyone smile. And when Lucian kissed his wife for the first time, he felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. 5 years passed. Valadorn became the strongest kingdom in the region. Trade flourished. The borders were secure. Crime dropped. Education spread to villages that had never seen a school. Roads were repaired. Bridges built. The treasury was full. Lucian and Mira had 2 children. A daughter named Marianne, after his mother. A son named Rowan, after the house. They were loud and wild and nothing like the cold, formal princes Lucian had read about in histories. They climbed trees, got into fights, asked impossible questions. Lucian adored them. In the quiet moments when he held his daughter or taught his son to read, he understood what his father had thrown away. This warmth, this connection, this feeling that you were building something that would outlast you. He also understood why his father had been so afraid of it. Love made you vulnerable. It gave the world a weapon to use against you. If you loved something, you could lose it, and losing it would destroy you. But Lucian had learned something his father never did. You could not protect yourself from pain by refusing to feel. Pain would find you anyway. The only choice was whether you faced it alone or with people beside you. He chose the latter. Tormund died in his sleep at 73. The old soldier who had raised him, who had taught him to fight, who had been more of a father than Cedric ever managed. Lucian wept at the funeral, openly, unashamed, and his children watched their father cry and learned that strength was not the absence of grief. It was the courage to feel it and keep living. Matthias followed 2 years later. The old scholar who had educated him, who had taught him that knowledge was power and mercy was strength. Lucian made sure the man had a statue in the royal library, a reminder that the best rulers were the ones who never stopped learning. Cade became his general. Mira became his queen in more than just name. She ruled beside him, not behind him, made decisions, led armies when needed, governed provinces. And when they fought, which they did often, they fought as equals. No one bowing, no one surrendering, just 2 people who trusted each other enough to argue and still stand together when it mattered. The kingdom thrived, and slowly, year by year, Lucian became something he had never thought possible. Content. 10 years after taking the throne, Lucian stood in the Great Hall and addressed the kingdom. He was 33 years old, still young, still strong. But he had lived more in those 33 years than most men lived in 80. People of Valadorn, he said. His voice carried through the hall and out into the courtyard where thousands had gathered. When I took this throne, I was a man with nothing to lose. I had been abandoned, betrayed, sentenced to die, and I survived by being harder than the world that tried to break me. I became what was necessary, a king who ruled through fear and respect. He paused. looked out at the faces, his people, his responsibility. But I have learned something in 10 years. Fear is useful, respect is necessary, but they are not enough. A kingdom built only on strength will collapse the moment that strength falters. What we need is something more: trust, community. The belief that we are all in this together, not subjects and king, but people building a future. He stepped forward. So today I announce reforms. More power to the provincial councils. More say for the common people in how they are governed. More accountability for every official, including me. This kingdom belongs to all of us, and it is time we acted like it. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some confused, some angry. Change was always frightening, even when it was good. But Lucian did not waver. He had spent his entire life afraid of being weak like his father, afraid that mercy would be seen as softness, that kindness would be seen as vulnerability. But he had finally learned the truth. Real strength was not about dominating others. It was about building something that could stand without you. And real power was knowing when to give it away. 15 years into his reign, on a cold winter morning, Lucian rode out to Grimstone Keep. He had not been back since his mother died. The place had been abandoned for years. The garrison reassigned. The servants moved to better positions. It was just a ruin now. Greystone and empty halls. Ghosts of a childhood he had tried to forget. But he needed to see it one more time. He walked through this courtyard where he had learned to fight. The great hall where he had sat alone while his mother stared out windows at a palace she would never see again. The room where she had died. It was cold, silent, exactly as he remembered. He stood in the center of the hall and closed his eyes. Let the memories wash over him, the loneliness, the rejection, the years of believing he was a mistake, a burden, something shameful. All of it felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. I survived, he said to the empty hall, to his mother's ghost, to the boy he used to be. We survived. He opened his eyes, looked around one last time, then he walked out and never went back. Some places you had to leave behind to keep moving forward. 20 years after taking the throne, King Lucian I stood on the palace balcony and watched the city celebrate. It was the anniversary of his coronation, a festival, music and dancing in the streets, children playing, merchants selling sweets, soldiers on leave drinking and laughing. Life, abundant and messy and beautiful. Mira stood beside him, her hand in his. She was 40 now, gray threading through her hair, scars on her arms from a dozen battles, still beautiful, still strong. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. What? Taking the throne. You could have walked away, lived quietly. Let someone else carry the weight. Lucian thought about it, every day. She looked at him, her eyes soft. But I do not regret staying, he continued. I do not regret the choice, because I look out there and I see something I helped build. Not alone, never alone, but I was part of it, and that matters. Yes, she squeezed his hand. It does. Their children ran onto the balcony. Marianne was 16 now, Rowan was 14, both loud and full of questions and completely unafraid of their father, which was exactly how Lucian wanted it. Father, can we go to the festival? Marianne asked. Have you finished your studies? She rolled her eyes. Yes. Then go. Be back by dark. They ran off, laughing. Mira smiled. You are too soft on them. Good. Someone should be. They stood together in comfortable silence. King and queen, partners. Two people who had been broken by the world and chose to rebuild together. In the distance, the city sparkled with lights. The kingdom stretched out in every direction, strong, stable, thriving. And in the royal square, a new statue had been unveiled that morning. King Lucian I, not sitting on a throne, not holding a sword, just standing, head up, eyes forward, a man who had survived and refused to let survival be enough. The inscription at the base read, "He was forgotten, he was abandoned, he was sentenced to die, and he became the greatest king we ever knew." Lucian stared at it and felt a strange mixture of pride and discomfort. He was not great. He was just a man who had done his best with what he had been given, who had made mistakes and learned from them, who had been shaped by cruelty and chose not to become cruel himself. But if the statue helped people believe in something better, He could live with that. "What are you thinking?" Mira asked. "That I am tired," he said honestly, "and grateful. And still here." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "That is enough." "Yes." He put his arm around her. "It is." The sun set slowly over Valadorn. The festival continued into the night. And in the palace, King Lucian I, once the forgotten prince, once the boy no one wanted, stood with his family and watched his kingdom celebrate. He had survived. He had fought. He had built something that would outlast him. And for the first time in his life, he was not afraid of what came next. He was simply, finally, at peace.